Okay, cool. So thank you everyone for joining. I'm really excited to have Arvid here for our biggest AMA so far, and also loads of new members from cohort 2 are here as well, which is just great to see everyone. It's our first time together on a call. So the usual process for AMAs is that Arvid will give us an introduction to himself, and then I'll ask a few questions, and if anyone has any questions they think of, just you can either drop them in the chat and I'll ask them on your behalf, or I think there's like a raise hand thing or a thumbs up, or just click one of like the icons if you want to ask the question in person, and I'll make sure that you get a chance to. And yeah, so really excited to have Arvid here. Thanks for coming. I've been a big fan of your stuff. You're like a pioneer in building in public and in just being totally open about everything you do. And you just seem like a very approachable person. You're always replying to people's tweets, which I think is great. Obviously, you're known for being a successful and exited SaaS founder. For people who don't know what SaaS is, it's basically software where you get paid monthly or on a regular basis by the customer to use it, and it's kind of the end goal for many software developers and now no coders, because I guess the image of SaaS is that you get to a point where it kind of runs along by itself and it's going smoothly and you don't have any bugs and people are paying you every month and you don't have so much to do. I'm sure that's quite far from the reality, even as you experienced it, but I know that you built your company up and sold it within 2 years, which must be some kind of record. And now you're a published author and writing another book. So super excited to have you here. I won't say any more, but I think we can assume that there will probably be some people here who don't know who you are. So it would be great to hear your backstory, and then we can jump into the questions.
Sure. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited to talk to so many people. It's really nice. So many founders too. I really like that, like chatting with people who have a plan, who see themselves somewhere else in the future. Always exciting. But let me get to my own story quickly. Don't want to take too much time with this because you already mentioned most of the things. Built a business in the ed tech space, education technology. Co-founded that with my girlfriend. She was my life and business partner. She still is my life partner. And business, I guess, we sold. She was an online English teacher at that point, and we built a productivity tool for other teachers just like her to essentially save time, which translated into more opportunities to make money, because online English teaching is pretty much like what we're doing right now. But imagine that instead of me sitting here, there's like a 5-year-old Chinese child who doesn't speak English at all. And if you do that for like 10 hours a day and you still have to write reports for the parents to read, it just eats so much time. And we built a tool that made this much faster. We automated a lot and templating, little things, but really nice, went super well with the community there. And we grew this from, like you said, 0 to a sizable number, $55,000 in monthly recurring revenue. And I'd like to do touched on this with the SaaS definition you just gave, because it's the holy grail of revenue, right? Recurring revenue is just stuff that comes in every single month, almost reliably. Even the churn, like the people who stop paying for your business, is reliable. Like you can at some point see a percentage and you can expect 3 or 4 or 5 or 10% next month to go away. So you even know how much less money you make. So you have to compensate that with marketing and sales. So getting to that point definitely wasn't easy, but it was super nice to be there, because with that kind of monthly recurring revenue, the business is working pretty well. That was essentially at that point, and that was, $55,000, like 600 something in annual recurring revenue. And at that point, people got interested in maybe acquiring our business, and we got acquired just under 2 years after we started. Feedback Panda, that was the name of the business, by a private equity company called SureSwift Capital. That's very active in the bootstrapping indie hacker space, with other people attached to them as well, who sold to them, who are working with them, who founded funds with them. This is a very interesting space where everybody seems to know each other. So that was cool. And after that, I fell into this void where I didn't know what to do, because I was running the business the whole time and all of a sudden we'd sold it. So I thought, I need to fill my time. and I started writing, essentially writing about all the things that I learned in those 2 years and the many years before Feedback Panda, where I had tried to build bootstrapped SaaS businesses and failed sometimes horribly and sometimes somewhat, but always kind of, it didn't go where I wanted it to go. So there was a lot of experience from that. And all of this culminated essentially in my book, Zero to Sold, which I published, must have been like almost 5 months ago, like 5 something months ago. That went pretty well. Like lots of people bought it, lots of people read it, lots of people quote it, which I'm extremely proud of and super happy about. Now I'm writing a new book called Audience First, because in Zero to Sold and in my own experience, I figured out that if you don't start with the audience, if you don't start with the people you want to serve, then you make mistakes along the way. Right? If you just build something that you think is really cool, but you don't know if it helps anybody, and if it helps somebody, if there's enough of those people to actually sustain your business, right? It's just a lot of risk. So the approach of putting your audience first, building your audience first, serving your audience first, that is kind of where I'm going with the new work. And that's pretty much me currently in a nutshell. Software engineer, that's what I used to be. Entrepreneur is what I became, and writer is what I am.
That's such a good path. I want to talk a lot about the audience first approach, but first, I'm really interested. You said just now, and you said in your book that Feedback Panda obviously wasn't your first rodeo. You had failures before, and I'm interested to know if you can tell us a bit about those failures and what you think changed between those failures and Feedback Panda that meant that Feedback Panda became the success that the others didn't.
Right. Well, one of the failures that I really like to talk about is because it's so clear in hindsight what we did wrong. A couple of friends and I live in Berlin in Germany here, and a couple of friends and I, we founded a business here in Berlin trying to build a local food marketplace. We wanted to, and it was 2014, 15 something. We wanted to capitalize on this foodie movement. There was a lot of hipsters in the city and they wanted good local food. And outside of Berlin, there's essentially nothing, right? Berlin is a gigantic city, and then there's just lots of space, lots of forests, lots of agriculture, but not much in terms of people, a lot of farmers, and they wanted to sell into the city. So we thought, lots of people in the city who like good food and lots of farmers who wanted to sell into the city. We can build something. And then we just locked ourselves into our office that we rented for no reason, and built something for like half a year, like 8 something months, just built a product that we thought would be really cool. And you can probably guess where this is going. And we never talked to the farmers if they would actually have time to be in front of a computer and put the inventory in there. And we never talked to the foodies to see what they really wanted to see on a marketplace website. We just built and wow, and cool designs. And like what people do who think they have a good idea but never validate it. Well, we didn't. Like we never validated any of these things. And honestly, I didn't even put a payment system into our online marketplace. Like that's how little validation we did with this. So we released a product that was completely unusable, that friends and family tried out and then kind of walked away from, and figured out, okay, we did everything wrong, and then kind of started just not spending much time on the business anymore. And both the designer and I, minority shareholders, we walked away from the project. The original founder still runs the project, pivoted ever since. Like it's now not an online marketplace, but a food subscription box for B2B, where it's much more clear that there's an actual audience who has a desire. Like if you're a business and you have a lot of employees, I mean, at least before Corona hit, they used to be in offices and you could actually give them stuff, right? So you would give them food boxes and they would get like nice fruits and vegetables from the area. So that was the business. Pivoted, and it did well until a couple months ago, but I'm not part of this anymore anyway. But that is my story. Like we didn't validate, and we spent almost a year building a project, building a product on technology that didn't make much sense, but totally different story, for nobody. Like we essentially built it for just the 3 of us, and that was quite a waste. I have a couple more of these stories, but they almost the exact same thing. No validation of the clients, no validation of the customers. The project itself wasn't clear if it actually solves a problem that is a critical problem. It may have solved a problem, but not a problem that is big enough for people to open their purses, right, to pay some money. So yeah, validation always has been the downfall, and that's what I understood. With Feedback Panda, we flipped it around. We understood the audience because Danielle was part of it. right? She was an online English teacher. She understood the exact problem and how strongly she felt about it. And she also understood her community because she was part of that community, right? She was part of the audience that we were going to have pay money for the product. She was talking to them every day, or she was reading about what they said every day. So it was a totally different approach. We spent a lot of time figuring out, is this critical? Is this going to be something that people need, not just want, but actually need and can pay for, right? Budget, is there a budget? All these things now I understood from my experience of having failed at getting this right in the first place.
Yeah, I feel like I read and hear on podcasts so often the importance of validating your idea first, and I just never ever listen to that advice. But you really have to be burned by it, and before you actually start taking it on board, I think. And I'm increasingly feeling burned because I've built a few projects exactly like that, and now I take it much more seriously.
There's a problem with validation. I mean, just from a theoretical perspective, there's this German social scientist called Niklas Luhmann, and he talks about theory and about truth, you know, like philosophers. I used to study this at university, so it always comes to me when we talk about validation. And he said, you cannot validate a theory. You can only invalidate it. You can only find things to disprove a theory, but you can never say this theory is true, because just you only missing one counterexample, right? In your approach to validating a theory means that you think it's true, but it's really not. And so when we talk about validation, the best approach that I see, that I found for myself, is trying to actively invalidate whatever you're trying to do. Not to actively try to validate it, but to search for things that invalidate your theory. Like you're building a tool for, let's take my latest project. I'm building a link tool for authors, because people who write books, they need to have links and they need to be stable even when the original website goes away. So that's my current software project that I'm building. So I'm trying to actively ask authors, do you even care about this, right? I don't ask them, oh, would you like to have this? I ask them, how on a list of all your problems, where does link stability rank? And if they say, well, I don't even have that on my list, and luckily not too many have said this, but some have, so it's a hit and miss, then it's kind of invalidated on some level, at least for some partial audience. I could ask other people, maybe people with more links in their books. Maybe for them it's a higher priority problem, and maybe that is my audience. Not all authors, but just people with more than 150 links per book. Just try to figure out by invalidating your theory, how you can most likely keep it valid, if that makes sense. It's just a different approach. It's like a different thought pattern behind validation.
I mean, it makes perfect sense, but I think it's such a difficult thing to do in practice, because often when you have an idea, you feel kind of emotionally invested in it, and you don't want people to say bad things about it because you're so convinced that it's going to be a success. And in a way, you need to have that kind of belief to sometimes keep going and to put the required amount of effort in. So to go out and ask people, what don't you like about this? Do you think this is going to suck? Is really counterintuitive, but absolutely necessary, as you say.
The moment you overlap your identity with your work, and for founders, this is particularly hard not to do, because nobody else cares about these things as much as we do, right? So it's part of our identity. But when it comes to validation, you have to take the scientific approach and really step back and see it as one of many options of what you could be doing. And I think that makes it easier to take the negative feedback. And just because somebody doesn't care for something doesn't mean your idea is bad. It just means that they don't care about it, right? It's what Seth Godin always says. If somebody doesn't like what you're doing, well, then they are not your audience. Somebody else might be. And unless you're absolutely certain that nobody out there is your audience, then you may just be talking to the wrong people, which itself is an assumption that needs to be validated and invalidated, right? So it takes some grit and some just sustained effort to consistently validate like a theory or your idea or something, to a certain point. But just don't give up too quickly when people say negative things, because they might just be the wrong people.
Yeah, I think certainly it comes with time and with like more attempts, I think, because I remember, earlier in my career when I had an idea, I would think about it for years at a time and just be obsessed with it. And the more I think of ideas and the more I launch, the less attached to each one I get, and the more willing I am to just throw it away and be a bit more kind of scientific about how I think about things. Because I really think people just don't take that on board. Even when they hear it from someone like you, they won't take it on board until they've wasted at least a few years of their life on unvalidated.
Well, hopefully not that many. But yeah, I think you're touching on an interesting point. Like the moment you understand your project as one of many, now not just necessarily not one of many potentials, but maybe actually one of many that you're working on, right? You could start multiple businesses. Nobody is forbidding you from trying out multiple things at the same time. And once you see this, you see them like next to each other. And I do this, I have multiple things going and I see where my priorities lie today, and maybe they're different tomorrow, and maybe I go back to one project the other day, but everything kind of grows at its own pace and everything is aimed at different audiences and different people. And you see, okay, they're almost interchangeable when it comes to my attention. So it's really only up to me how much of my identity I put in there. Right? How much it hurts when something doesn't work, because I might just replace it with some other idea I had. And I bet most people who are founders or who have been thinking about building stuff before, they have this list of 400 ideas, or maybe 40, maybe 20. When there's this, maybe just in their mind, doesn't have to be in a document, of things that they always wanted to do. Well, why not take a couple of them and try to do them at the same time? That will also teach you a transferability of certain kind of knowledge and certain kind of questions that you can ask people between projects. You'll notice that some questions you can always ask, like how much do you care about this, right? But some questions, they don't always fit. Like where in your workflow is this particular action? Like for some problems that you're solving, there's no workflow, right? That they're just nuisances or something like that. So building this kind of repertoire of questions to ask people throughout different projects might help you when you come into like when a problem occurs, when you come into a situation where you don't know how to continue. Maybe another project and another question you ask there might get you some further and get you ahead at that point. So it's just really parallelized approach to entrepreneurship. Could work, doesn't have to, but might give you a broader view.
Yeah, absolutely. So for Feedback Panda, it kind of seemed like the audience fell into your lap, as it were, or you got quite lucky with that, because you suddenly had exposure through Danielle to this big group of people who had this quite pressing problem which wasn't being solved, and obviously you had the experience then to know how to validate it. I think the issue for a lot of people is they don't feel like they have access to an audience like that, and maybe they do, but they haven't realized it. But I think for a lot of people,
that's the difference,
in everyday life, they wouldn't know where to look for that. And by audience here, we're not talking about necessarily, people who are subscribed to your newsletter, but just access to a group of people, whether it's through friends or family or work or through your hobbies, that you could hopefully identify a problem for and try and solve it.
Yeah. Well, I wrote an article about this a couple months ago, like just trying to figure out a framework to approaching this, like finding your audience, right? And ranking them essentially, because the moment you find one audience, you probably find a couple more that you could potentially serve. And once you have a list, I don't know if it's just me, but once there's a list, I want to rank the list, right? I want to sort it. I want to see like which one is the most prevalent one, which is the one that's like least interesting. And I tried to figure out a framework for this. And of course, I'm still working on this, but the article was part of this. And it's like a 5-step approach. It's really figure out who you could serve, then figure out how much you care about each of these audiences, figure out if there is interesting problems in each of these audiences, figure out if they actually welcome help, if they have a budget, figure out the size of the market, and then kind of rank them by some kind of point system. That's what the article is, and I can probably find it and put the link in the chat too. Once I get a second, once I'm done talking, because I cannot multitask, it just doesn't happen. But the first step is the most important one. And that's what you just said. And I want to kind of go a bit deeper into this, because I feel this is the magical part, because that's the exploration part. Everything after this is really diving into stuff and doing research, figuring out market sizes, figuring out customer problems and customer profiles and these kind of things. That's more like the scientific an analysis part, but the exploration part, that's always fun. That's why I started with it, because it's also the first required step there. And you already said it. You are part of many audiences already, right? You are either a founder or a writer or a software engineer or a marketing professional, or like you're part of all these groups on a professional level. That's how we understand ourselves, right? In professionals, we group ourselves in professional circles. But that also exists with hobbies, that exists with just fields of interest. I don't know. My example is always, you cannot see an aquarium right now, but I really like fish, and I used to have an aquarium, and that puts me into the audience, many audiences, people who own aquariums, people who like aquariums, people who care about like aquatic ecosystems, and people who like certain kinds of fish, people who don't like certain kinds of fish, right? Not every single one of these audiences is necessarily one that you can monetize, but you're part of them. You're part of people who, or audiences, groups of people who have shared interests. And these are the ones that you're actively aware of. What I would suggest is to actually figure out which of those things that you're part of you're not aware of. The example that I have for that is, I don't know about everyone here, but when I get up in the morning, I usually walk into the kitchen and I make myself a tea. And other people may just get their coffee first thing in the morning, get a coffee. And either of those groups is an audience. People who drink coffee, people who drink tea. That's a pretty generic one. But then I myself, as a German, we love our herbal teas. I don't know why. It's like it's medical to a certain degree. Whenever you have like a cold coming on, you just throw on the herbal tea. Cures everything. Right? That's at least what I was told to believe, and I still do. But I know a lot about herbal teas. I know a lot about which kinds of herbs are supposed to do what in a medical sense. So I'm now part of this group of people who care about herbal medicine and care about teas. So that is a niche that is substantial. First off, it includes every single German. So that's 80 million people. And then it includes actual people who care about this stuff, right? Who have maybe a background in medicine or a background in just herbology. I don't know, like they have an interest in this particular field. And those people need help with whatever, right? They need help sourcing their teas. They need help understanding more about the properties, the healing properties of certain plants. That could be a blog. That could be an affiliate website if you wanted it to be, right? There's a business in all of these things. They could have a subscription business. You could have e-commerce subscription business for a tea delivery for people who really like herbal teas. You could build an online community where people exchange information and monetize that through like a paid newsletter or a paid community. There's just this one group, and that's the first thing I do in the morning. Then try figuring out what are the other things that you do, right? Do you wear a certain kind of shoe that not everybody would wear? Or do you like take your showers really hot or really cold? Is there something in there? Just observe yourself going through your day, and whenever you find your interaction with a thing, an object, or a substance, just try to write it down. Do this for a couple of days. Just write down, had a tea, took a shower, watched TV, went to a news website, opened my email, right? All of these are potential product spaces where an audience could live. Emails. I use hey.com. I've been using it ever since the day it came out because it's simple. That means I'm a person that likes email simple. There's digital minimalists. There's a Reddit community for digital minimalists that is 80,000 or 50-something thousand people big. That is a sizable community that is right there. So if you like minimalism and if you want to build something really cool for people who are like completely overwhelmed with email, right? You just needs you to notice that you're actually part of this group. And that is most easily done by observing your own life, observing what you do whenever you interact with an object, pen, writer, right? Just go through the objects that are around you, microphone, podcaster, right? Those people need something. They need like audio editing tools. They need podcast hosting software. They need courses on how to start a podcast. Everything around you is a potential source of an audience that you're already part of. And an audience is most easily served if you're part of it, right? That's what you alluded to with Danielle being an online teacher. yeah, we were in a super niche community just by her having the job that she was doing. And it was lucky that we figured out that this was actually a stable niche community of tens of thousands of teachers. And then we started serving them with a product and built out our market share in there. But you can only really realize what problems people have if you communicate with them. And nothing is easier than communicating with people in a community that you're part of. So that's what I suggest, to find these audiences.
Okay, so say I go through that exercise, I feel like I'd have maybe 50 audiences written on a list, and then I would need to rank them by certain criteria, which you already began to mention. Are there any of those criteria which you think are just absolute must, like the most important things to take into account?
Well, you really have to like what you're doing. Like, you really need to have the need to serve those people, which is why when I have my example list in the blog post there, when I just brainstormed through a couple audiences, tax professionals, tax advisors, and lawyers was on that list too, because I had interacted with a couple of those people in the recent past. And when I tried to figure out how much I care about lawyers on a scale from 0 to 10, guess how low my number was? You know, it's just not my audience. Like, I'm not a lawyer. I don't like lawyers. I don't like tax people. It's fairly boring. It's bureaucratic. Again, if you love this, if you love to build tax software, help tax advisors be better at their job, go for that. It's just not me. So for myself, I gave them a really, really low score, like a 2 or something. And for indie founders, bootstrapper, software engineers, I gave them a 10. Right? And just on my list, it was pretty clear after that step that for some audiences, I really, really felt like I needed to help them because I care. And for some, even though there was a lot of potential and a lot of budget, lawyers, tax advisors, they usually have a lot of money. I don't want to spend the next 5 years building something for people I don't care about, right? And if you want to build a business, you're probably going to be in it for longer than 2 years. I think we were an outlier with building this up in 2 years and then selling it. Usually takes people 3, 4, 5, maybe 10 years to build a solid business. I mean, it's going to be solid then, and you probably never have to deal with financial insecurity ever again. But the path leading there is going to be a long path. It's going to take a while. And you better have some sort of joy during all those years, because nobody else is going to believe in you if you don't. So if you already don't like what you're doing because you don't like the people that you're serving, it's probably not going to work out, which is why I think that's one of the most important things. And then after your own affinity, which is what I call the step, after your own affinity for this audience, you have to figure out, is there opportunity? Is there actually something in this audience, a problem that is worth solving? Some groups of people just don't want to be helped, or they don't have really big problems that would warrant a solution. Some people don't even want solutions to their problems. Some people just like the challenge, right? It's like, you never know. You have to figure this out. And that is research. You just really have to be part of those communities. I saw in the chat just now that the Reddit for digital minimalism was linked. Join. Follow people's conversation. If you're interested in a specific field, just be part of it. Go into Facebook groups where people talk about this stuff. Go to Reddit. Just go on Twitter and follow everybody you know from this particular audience. Go into their lists, their Twitter lists. Follow everybody in those lists. Just follow everybody and just see what they talk about. Figure out the things that come up more and more than other things. And those are usually the more urgent, the more important problems. Figure out how critical they are. Talk to people. It's actually quite easy, particularly on Twitter. Just really have to DM a person and ask them a question. I usually respond to all the DMs I get if I don't forget, which I sometimes do. But you know, anybody can talk to me as long as I follow them. Maybe I should turn that off. But you know, it's just well, they follow me, I eventually follow them. So the idea is you can reach out a lot of people, out to a lot of people, and get their take on problems in the industry if you just are brave enough to ask. And that's what going into a community means to me. Going in there, listening for a couple of days, and then just asking questions. Replying to people's questions with your opinion, asking questions, sharing what you know, just giving without asking. I mean, giving just information without asking for people to buy something immediately. That has worked super well for me whenever I did this in the past, and right now as well. Like my my book was so well received because I just shared blog posts, wrote and like posted my podcasts and all these things without asking for anything in return for half a year. That kind of charged people. That charged a certain level of, people wanting to reciprocate, right? They just wanted to give back because I've been supplying them with my thoughts and my learnings for all this time. And then I think I sold like 350 books on my first day when I launched because people had penned up all this excitement to give back, for which I'm super grateful because I'd never thought this was going to happen. But then it did. And it's really nice. It's really nice to see that there's this kind of exchange happening. And that's what you should be doing in a community, right? Just really be part of the communication, part of the conversation in the community, and slowly become somebody who other people listen to, who they trust, then maybe collaborate with people in the community and build something with them, for them. Couldn't be better because you need initial users to give you feedback. And if it comes from within the community, it's just so much easier than trying to force people into your product. It's always hard. It's always hard to get your first customers. So that will always be a challenge. But if you're already established as somebody in the community, it's going to make it much easier.
Yeah, one of my favorite SaaS founders is this guy, Kevin Wagstaff, who did Spectora, and I interviewed him for my Growth Lessons newsletter, and he knew nothing about home inspection, which is the market he chose to build for, but he spent a year in the forums just giving advice on like stuff he knew about like digital marketing and SEO, which was nothing to do with the actual product he was building. But he was like, how can I provide value to these people? And then in return, they gave him feedback on his product and met him for coffees and helped him to design it. So I think providing value really does work if you can do it. And it doesn't need to be related to what you're actually going to build in the end. Great. Neeraj asked a question. He said, curious about what makes more sense. So choosing a certain customer segment and then tweaking your ideas along the way, or having an idea and tweaking your customer segment along the way to fit the product. I think that's what the question was.
Well, to me, that sounds, on a certain level, sounds like idea first versus audience first. I know it's not meant exactly like it, but it kind of feels like if you have a product and you try to fit it into a market, it's like almost stuffing it into a market and hoping that there's a market there. It has a certain negative connotation for me. I would always try to establish the audience, the target customers, your market, your segment first, and then exploring the problems in the market. And that the thing is, and that's what I write about the Zero to Sold too, it's like 4 steps. It's audience, critical problem, it's left or right, doesn't matter, solution and product. That's the 4 steps that I think, right? You start with your audience, you figure out who they want to serve, you validate that. Are they there? Do they exist? Are they nice? Do I like them? And then you go to critical problem, figure out what are their problems. Are they critical? Is it something that actually matters to them? You can do this with these Eisenhower matrix kind of things with urgency and importance, right? If it's both urgent and important, then it's like the best. And if it's not urgent but important, that's kind of cool. Not important but urgent, also cool. And neither of them, throw it away. You can like validate things like that. There are different approaches to that too. But critical problem, just find out, is it critical? And if so, can I actually solve it? That would be the next step. Can I build a solution? And that doesn't mean like build a product. It just means, is there a solution to this? In our terms with Feedback Panda, the idea was, can we solve people's unpaid overtime problem that they have with all this extra text that they need to write? Because they needed to write paragraphs of text for every single student they taught in a day. And they often taught 20 students and often didn't remember what they taught them and how exactly they had acted. So can we help people dealing with this? And yes, the solution was to keep notes along the way and then automate all of this additional text into a templating system. It didn't matter if it was like a templating system in a SaaS application or on a mobile phone, or if you would like dictate it to somebody. The actual implementation didn't matter. It's just, was there a solution to this? And the moment you have found a solution and you validate that, in terms of, also, this is also a communication thing. You talk to your potential customers, you ask them, okay, I want to approach it this way. Does this fit into your workflow? Like, is this something that could actually work in between all the other things you need to do in your job? Because you're always going to be looking at one thing that you're going to be solving, But this is one thing of many in the large workflow that every single person in their professional life or wherever you choose to help them has to go through during the day, right? What you're doing is one thing out of many that they have to be doing. So it has to fit in there. And that is where solution validation comes in. And once you figure that out, once you understand, okay, yeah, this could work. I could actually open a web browser at this point and type a couple things, copy it and put it back in there. Then you build it. That's the product part. So if at any of these points you find out, my audience is too generic, they seem to have widely diverging interests, you zoom in, you go into a more specific segment. Let's say you have your segment and you go into the critical problem and you see, okay, they have a couple problems, but none of them seem to be critical. All right, go a step back, find another segment, right? Maybe open it up a bit or find an adjacent segment, right? Maybe it's not online English teachers, it's online music teachers, right? And then you zoom in. Do they have critical problems? Oh yeah, it's hard to synchronize video so you can actually hear and communicate, you know? And then you go into, can I solve this? And then you figure out, no, the speed of light is unchangeable. So you go back and you try to find another kind of, it's just a step-by-step approach. And once you land at product and you can actually build it, then you have 3 validated steps. You have your audience, the critical problem, and the solution. And then you can build a product and likely will be able to build a product. And that doesn't matter if it's a no-code product or a code product or an info product like a book or anything like this. You can always, once you have a solution that's validated, find something to deal with it. So a really long-winded answer to a question. I'm sorry for that, but I think I would rather change the audience segment, the customer segment, and then go into this loop again and find out new problems and solve them again, than trying to force my problem or my product into an audience that might not care. Because that is really, you spend a lot of marketing money reaching people that don't care about your product. Essentially a waste of money. It's a waste of your time because you're not helping anybody. You've been building this and then there's like 10 people that want to use it, but that's not going to make it a business. It's just going to make it a project. So yeah, I would resegment the audience. Sorry for that.
Cool. Pierre said, how do you go about validating the feedback you receive from your users? What makes it to the product roadmap and what doesn't?
That's always interesting. Yeah, that's one of the problems that are very hard to solve, and they are extremely unique to each business. So anything I'm saying here is, grain of salt. You will have some sort of core functionality or core content or core whatever in your solution that is essential to solving the critical problem of your verified audience. So that's where this comes to me, because then people start saying, oh yeah, I need this, and I would really like it if it also did this. We had a lot of these people reach out to us on Intercom, through Intercom and Feedback Panda, and say, yeah, I would love a button here for this and a button there for that. But our critical mission was to make it fast for them to write student feedback. We didn't care about like managing scheduling or payments. Our critical mission was student feedback fast. And everything that made student feedback easier or faster would go into the project. And anything that would not do either of those things, we would say, oh yeah, we're gonna consider this. And it was gone. Like we just put it on a list, but it was list of things not to do. Because people always have their demands, and you should at least look into why they say the thing, like why they ask you to build this, not immediately dismiss it, like I just suggested, but look into where it comes from. If people ask about a certain feature that you feel may not be the core of the product, then wonder, why did they ask you to build this feature? Is your messaging off? Do they think your product is doing something else than you think it should be doing? Or did you just not understand their problem well enough? Is there something to the problem that warrants such a feature? I think it's always an opportunity to reflect on the motivation, but in the end, you are the one who decides what goes into the product, not your customers. I mean, the customers decide if that will be a viable business or not, but you are the one taking the shot, right? You're the one essentially deciding what goes in. So I would definitely look for core value always, but if it feels like it might be nice for one of your customers, but not be nice for other customers, then also don't look into this. I've written about this more elaborately than I'm now kind of giving you from my recollection in the book too. There's a couple of feature prioritization chapters in there, because that's exactly what you're going to be struggling with in the beginning, where everybody tells you what they want, but nobody tells you what they need, right? So at that point, it's always very important to figure out how can I help most people that I'm currently serving and that I could be potentially serving. What has the most impact? And there's feature prioritization frameworks that I also talk about. That's like the DIE, like the DIE framework that was used by Baremetrics, Josh Pickford just recently sold Baremetrics for $4 million after like running it for 5 or 6 years. It's a really cool product. I'm wearing their swag today because they send me a nice shirt because they're really nice people. And they probably still are, even though Josh is gone, but it's just a really nice tool. Also a bootstrap business, also really focusing on one specific thing, which was essentially Stripe metrics, right? Like showing you your internal business financial details and projecting it and showing you how you compare to other people. It's a really, really nice project. And they have this DIE framework, the demand, impact, and effort. So you kind of weigh how much demand is for the feature versus how much impact would it have and how much effort would it take to build. And then there's Intercom, who have, what's their, I forgot, but it's also something similar. It scales impact, effort, and something else, 2 other things. Get the book. No, but honestly, you can go to Intercom feature prioritization, Google that, and you will find what they use. It's really just scoring things, pretty much like we did with the audience list just earlier. It's like figuring out how much time would it take, how much benefit would it give to the customers, and how many customers does it reach. And if you can do this pretty easily in just broad categories for almost every feature. And if that is enough for you, rank them, do the most important first. Hope that helps.
Absolutely. Yelma, do you want to ask your question with your voice?
Sure. Putting me on the spot here. Yeah, so basically what I notice a lot in the no-code community is, of course, no-code lends itself very well to, as soon as you have an idea, you can build it and you can launch it within 24 hours if you're quick about it. So this is the mode of action that a lot of people take. It's, I have an idea and I just build. So there's no validation. Usually there's a bad launch, and then they go back to square one and they repeat the same thing and they hope something sticks at some point. So it seems to me that these people are really unaware of the problem, which is a lack of validation. And my question would be, can you make them aware of this, or do they have to put their hand on the stove first and burn it before they are aware of the problem?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I mean, and experience trumps almost any kind of other knowledge, right? Like everything you've deeply understood because you've actually consciously worked through it will be much more deeper ingrained into your understanding. It's also a schooling thing. I feel the reason that many people just jump at the tools and try to build is because to build the tools, they promise success, and we've all been trained to avoid failure, right? Failure is something that we've been punished for in school, and that we've been punished for almost all our lives. Whenever something wasn't just perfect, other people claimed that other people were better than us. In school, they got better grades. And compliance in the business, right? If you're compliant, you rise through the ranks and all of this stuff. This has trained us to avoid failure and avoid experimentation, and maybe not experimentation, because that in no code is one of the first things that people do. But avoid confrontation with negative feedback. So people shy away from validation, and I don't think it's just business. Like most decisions that people make in their lives, they try not to think about too much when it comes to what could go wrong and what could be the negative, the invalidation here. I think what we can only do is just really talk about it more. It's talk about, and not just sharing the successes that we have on Twitter, but also sharing our invalidation right? Talk to a couple people today. Seems like I have a bad idea. Nobody writes this. Nobody gives that statement. Everybody just says, oh yeah, I've got validated something today and I'm building a business now. And then people cheer, but nobody talks about losing and just taking a step back and then reorienting yourself, which is what I'm trying to do, because I constantly try to do this, which is why I talk about this, because I feel it's fine to say, okay, this didn't work, right? And to publicly say it too. Because first off, you help other people understand that this is a viable outcome of any situation. And also you help other people understand that in this industry, this might not work, right? This is also helping them if they are in the same space. And I guess for us founders, like everything we do should be something that we do with each other, not against each other, right? If somebody needs to know anything about the Chinese edtech community, talk to me. I'll share my knowledge, right? There's nothing that I need to keep secret here. This is just something that I would like to share. But to answer your question, I think it's an experience thing, or just being bombarded with the fact that you should validate enough.
Yeah, from my own personal experience, I think the problem I have is that I didn't really understand what proper validation meant. I thought it was just like, I have an idea. I asked some people, do you think this is a good idea? Potentially I asked them, would you pay for it? And the first thing I built with no code was this. I spoke to one woman who works for a charity. She said she wanted to get more testimonials from her customers. So I built the whole platform to help her get video testimonials from them, from her customers. Turned out none of them wanted to record video testimonials. But I thought I'd validated it because I'd had one person. I thought I'd done a great job actually, because I'd had this one person who was now my audience. But turned out like the actual audience was also the people who had to record the videos.
That's a very interesting point. Like when you do customer validation, treat it as a recursive opportunity, right? It's like, it's not just that you need to talk to your customers, you might also need to understand their customers. There's like three ways that a business usually provides value, right? You save somebody time, you save somebody money, or you allow people to make more money. So either of these three is great. If you have all three at the same time, awesome. But if you allow other people to make money, then they themselves have customers. And to understand how and why they make money, you will need to understand who they sell to, right? Who pays for their products. So at least there's like one level of abstraction that you need to also understand in any given market. Like if you make a product for podcasters, you need to understand who's listening to the podcast, or who's paying them for their ads or something, like who's sponsoring the podcast and how they approach that interaction. So in the B2B setting, at least, that's very important to understand, like not just the people you're serving, but the people that they serve to. That definitely is a thing. I want to give one recommendation here. There's a book called The Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick. This might be the most important book that you'll ever read when it comes to reaching out to customers. And I highly recommend it because first off, the book is really thin. You can read this in like 2 or 3 hours. And it talks about how you should not talk to people. Like it's called the mom test because if you ask your mom, do you like my project? Well, what's she gonna say, right? Of course she's gonna say, oh, great, I would buy this. And she's probably even gonna give you money just to make you feel like you're doing something good. But business is not, most of the time, businesses are not built on the opinion of your mother. So might just as well talk to people that are not your mother. And talk to them in a way where they cannot easily fall into this trap of saying, oh yeah, I really like what you're doing. So asking them, would you pay for this? It's often fine, but it's already a leading question because I can imagine paying for something. But if you ask me, would you pay for this right now? Would you pay for this, please? And then have like a credit card input field or something. Totally different response, right? Because then people would say, I would probably pay for this if only. And then come the demands. And then you'll see what they really want instead of what you already offer. And asking them not about if they want to pay for it or if they need it, but asking them about their problems, about, well, do you struggle with this? To say, yeah, sometimes, okay, it doesn't sound too critical. What do you do to currently solve this problem? If they say, nothing, I'll just deal with it. Well, then they're not going to buy your product, right? And all of these questions and how to approach this particular like non-mom question way of approaching these interviews, that's what the Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick offers you. It's a really good book. I'm not getting paid for this advertisement, but I really like Rob and I like his book. So I recommend it because it's important. You will, in this stage you're in right now, you will need to talk to a lot of people. And the earlier you understand what not to ask, the better you'll be off.
Yeah, I agree. It is a really good book. So we've almost run out of time and we've just spent the whole time talking about audience, which I think is not a bad thing, because to me, it seems like it's actually one of the most important things. And if you get that right, I think Derek Sivers said that success is, or your idea is a multiplier of your times your execution is like your success. So if you start with a bad idea, you know, however well you execute, it's not going to do well, but it could be a multiplier. But it feels like audience should be built into that somewhere as being like, if you pick a really good audience to start with, then, you know, as with Feedback Panda, you said you barely did any marketing once you had it out there. The organic growth through word of mouth was what kept it going, and that's a figment of picking the right audience, I think, at the start.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Simon says like, start with why. I think he's absolutely right. I would say start with who is just as fine, you know, because both are kind of the same. Like the why is like, why do I want to serve people? The who is, who do I want to serve? There's not that much of a difference, but you have to definitely get the starting point right, because everything else builds on getting this validated, right? Understanding who you're serving, understanding your affiliation, your affinity, these things, and understanding how you can help them. That is going to make so much of a difference later, because you know that this stuff is there, right? If you know that the thing you're building has a validated problem, a validated solution, and a validated audience, and it's still not selling, then you know that it's not the audience's fault. It's not the problem's fault. It's not the solution's fault. It's probably your sales process's fault. Like, you know, you can figure out where the problems lie if validation has been there on the foundational levels. You just know how far do I need to go back to figure out where I went wrong? And it's often not that far. If you start with your product, it could be anything. It could be the audience, it could be the problem, it could be the solution, your sales, or just your face. I don't know. It could be anything. So you'll never really know, because it's just all in the air. But yeah, I think audience is the most important part. But I don't want to steal more time. What else do you want to talk about? I'm so excited.
Well, okay. So zooming out a bit, Rob Wallings on his Indie Hackers podcast the other day, or interview, he said that the SaaS space, which was brilliant a few years ago, is now getting quite saturated. And actually, these days, info products are kind of a safer bet or an easier way to make money quickly. Do you think that there are still opportunities for SaaS, or if you were starting a business, if you were starting from the position of one of us today, would you pursue a SaaS, or would you go with an info product, or something completely different, a community perhaps?
Both. Just diversify from the beginning. I mean, I went with both, right? I built a SaaS and I wrote a book, which to me is considered an info product. Yeah. And I'm writing another book and I'm building another SaaS. I don't know. I just want to help people where they are. So it also depends really on the audience that you choose. Like you'll find audiences that have no need for SaaS products. Maybe coffee drinkers is one of those audiences, right? Like as much coffee as you consume and you love coffee, do you really want to go to your computer and deal with, so, you know, or your phone? It may not be the right thing. And I've seen people try to launch apps for coffee aficionados. Didn't go too well. Like there seems to be a disconnect between having the phone in your hand and enjoying a cup of coffee. Who knew? But those people sure love books, right? They sure love like a nice encyclopedic approach to coffee beans or something like that. So it really depends on who you want to serve. It also depends on you. If you want to build a SaaS product with the recurring revenue stream, then you might need to figure out which of the audiences that you could serve is more prone to accept such a product. And the thing that you said about Rob, and he mentioned this, there's some sort of saturation because I think tooling is getting much easier. Most of the tools that exist, and no-code is playing a big role here, can solve most problems pretty quickly. So building a business out of this is hard because tools are already competing with this. There is this book by April Dunford called Obviously Awesome. She talks about positioning. She's like an absolute expert on positioning, which is a later part in your story as a founder, but it's an important one. And she has this concept of competitive alternatives. So it's not just competitors, right? If the Feedback Panda had like maybe one competitor who came slightly after we started a business a couple months later, but we had one major competitive alternative, and that was Google Sheets. It's not a competitor. Google is not competing with our little SaaS, but the fact that there's Excel and Google Sheets out there and people were sharing templates and automating stuff with formulas and stuff, that was already competition, and that was free. So we had to build something really good to compete with Google or Microsoft and their flagship products, Excel and Sheets, right? So that is something that you have to always understand, is that these things are also there. Like these things are already there. They're well established. There's a lot of experts. Notion, right? Everybody's doing their documentation in Notion now. There's no designated Notion consultants who help other people set up their Notion systems for their businesses. Right? The spaces just get saturated over time, and the tools get more powerful, solving more niche problems easily just by cobbling a couple of things together. So I would agree that it's harder to build a SaaS business in a niche that may already have a solvable approach through other tools, but you can always try. And if you build a really cool business where you are the heart and soul of it, and you really care about those people, you will outperform any Excel sheet manipulation thing, just because you know the exact problems that your audience has and how to solve them in the perfect way that Google Sheets never can. Google Sheets will always be Google Sheets. You always have problems with embedding it into other places, or you always have problems importing stuff, but you can build something that is perfectly attuned to the problems of your specific niche audience. So he's right at a degree. I still believe that there's space, but you have to really figure out your audience. You can't just go into a gigantic market and say, I want to build this. Then somebody is going to build this within 20 minutes using no code and have a better approach to sales than you, and then you're out. Like, you have to be really specific. Find a really specific niche. Best if it's a tribe, a little like people interconnected, everybody's in this community. Just like we had, luckily our community was very tribal. Everybody knew each other. They followed the same people. They had the same interests, right? That makes word of mouth and just working with people much easier. But if you can find such an audience and you can solve their specific problems for them and only for them, then you can build a SaaS. That's my opinion.
That's an awesome answer. Thank you. So we're out of time now. I just wanted to do one thing before everyone goes. Can everyone turn on their cameras? And I just want to take a quick screenshot, if that's cool.
Right,
why can I not see?
The complexity of Zoom.
Yeah, I know. It's like some people are now missing.
Where do they go? Are we taking attendance? So like in class?
Well, like I can't actually see. Oh, there you are. Right. Okay, that'll do. Some people may not want to be. Okay, everyone smile. Thumbs up. Cool. Oh, Martin, too slow. I'll do another one. One more.
Was that double thumbs?
Right. Awesome. Thank you so much, Arvid. That was like every single minute of that. Oh, someone's just joining now. Must have been a time zone issue. Every minute was like
recorded.
Yeah, it was all recorded. Every minute was brilliant. And yeah, I'm gonna watch it back like 5 times because I just the whole audience first thing has like completely changed the way I think about everything now. And I wish I'd known it a year ago, to be honest. But
I'm really happy about this. And if you have any questions, I'm writing this book, right? I'm writing audience first. So if any of you wants to like tell me about what you want to learn about, any questions you have, email me, go on Twitter, hope that you can DM me, or just go to audiencefirst.link. I have a little section in there where you can just send me messages about what you want to see in the book, because Audience First, the book, is going to be an audience first product and you're the audience. So, might as well ask you. So that's the whole point. Please just let me know what you need to know about this step, because I have my own perspective on this and I want to know what other founders need to learn, need to understand. So reach out through there. can also sign up to be like an alpha reader. I'm gonna soon publish the first draft, so might want to look into that. But that's where I'm right now. Just sorry for interrupting you here, but I just wanted to throw that in because that's what I'm currently really interested in, is getting other people's opinions.
Yeah. Well, I've got tons of thoughts, and I'll definitely be sharing them with you. But it's awesome, and it's great that you're building in public again, which I think is a very good way to start reaching an audience, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So, anyone that wants to stick around, I thought we could do like just 5 or 10 minutes of networking in breakout rooms. Arvid, feel free to go. I'm sure you have other stuff to be doing, but you can stick around if you'd like to. But if everyone's up for that, then I'll just stick us in a load of breakout rooms for like 10 minutes.